I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. My daughter's husband threw her off their yacht into the Atlantic Ocean at midnight. She was 4 months pregnant. As I screamed into the darkness, watching her disappear into the black water, they laughed and said she was being dramatic. Then they turned the yacht around and headed back to shore, leaving her there to die. When the Coast Guard finally pulled her from the water 3 hours later, barely alive, I made one phone call to my older brother. I said only 4 words. Time to end them. My name is Donna Sullivan. I'm 62 years old, a retired architect who spent 40 years designing buildings not navigating the treacherous waters of wealthy, powerful families. I'm a quiet woman by nature. I raised my daughter Emily alone after my husband died when she was just 8. I taught her to be kind, to work hard, to trust people. I taught her wrong. The evening started innocent enough. It was late September, and we were anchored off the coast of Martha's Vineyard aboard the Bradford family's luxury yacht, the Providence. The air had that crisp New England bite to it, the kind that warns you winter isn't far behind. I stood on the deck holding a glass of lemonade, watching. Always watching. That's what 40 years of architecture teaches you, to observe structures, to notice when something doesn't quite fit, when the foundation isn't as solid as it appears. 50 guests mingled around me. Champagne glasses clinked. Jazz music floated from hidden speakers. Women in designer dresses laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Men in tailored suits talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes. And there was my Emily. She stood near the starboard railing wearing a navy dress that concealed her small baby bump. 26 years old, beautiful, and trying so hard to fit into this world that would never accept her. I watched her smile at a woman whose necklace probably cost more than our entire yearly grocery budget. The woman looked right through Emily like she was invisible. My daughter had married Jack Bradford 2 years earlier. He was a hedge fund manager, handsome in that polished prep school way that wealthy families seem to breed. Harvard MBA, family money going back 5 generations. The kind of man who'd never worked a day in his life but talked constantly about creating value. I'd never trusted him. Call it a mother's intuition. Or maybe just the instinct of a woman who'd spent decades reading blueprints and understanding that what looks solid on the surface can hide structural problems underneath. But Emily loved him. Or thought she did. Across the deck, Jack stood with his father, Senator William Bradford. Even at 68, the senator commanded attention. Silver hair perfectly styled. Expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. That practiced politician's smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'd met him exactly twice before. Both times he'd looked at me the way you might look at furniture, noting my existence, but finding me unworthy of real attention. Tonight, though, something was different. I watched them, Jack and his father, standing together near the bow. They kept glancing at Emily, then looking away. Whispering. Their body language set off every alarm bell I'd learned to trust over 6 decades of life. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That morning felt like years ago now, but I remembered every detail. Emily had called me at 7:30, her voice shaking with excitement. "Mom, I told Jack about the baby." I'd been making coffee in my small kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window of my modest apartment. And how did he react? Silence. Too long. "Emily." He seemed surprised. He didn't say much. Just stared at me for a minute, then said he needed to make a phone call. He went into his office and closed the door. My hand had tightened on the phone. "What kind of call?" "I don't know. He was in there for 20 minutes. When he came out, he said we'd talk about it later. That we had the yacht party tonight and couldn't be distracted." "Sweetheart, that doesn't sound—" "It's fine, Mom." Her voice had that forced brightness I knew so well. "He's just processing. It's a big surprise. He'll be excited once it sinks in. I'm sure of it." But I wasn't sure. Not at all. I'd asked the question I'd been holding back for 2 years. "Are you happy, Emily? Really happy?" Another pause. "I will be, Mom. Once Jack adjusts to the baby news, everything will be perfect. You'll see." Now standing on this yacht, surrounded by strangers who saw me as nothing more than the mother-in-law from modest means, I watched Jack whisper something to his father. Senator Bradford's eyes narrowed. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then they both looked directly at Emily. Not the way a husband and grandfather-to-be should look at a pregnant woman. Not with joy or concern or even neutral interest. They looked at her like she was a problem that needed solving. I set down my lemonade and started moving toward Emily. My sensible low heels clicked against the polished deck. I was still 30 feet away when Jack raised his voice just enough to carry over the jazz music. "Emily, come here for a moment." My daughter turned, saw her husband and father-in-law standing together at the far end of the deck near the stern railing, the darker end where the yacht's lights didn't reach as well. She smiled that hopeful, desperate-to-please smile I'd seen too often in the past 2 years and walked toward them. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to grab her, to pull her away. But what would I say? What proof did I have that they'd been whispering, that they'd looked at her wrong? So I walked, quickly but not running, past clusters of guests who didn't even notice me, past the wet bar where a bartender polished glasses, past everything. I was still 20 feet away when I heard Jack's voice change. The polished veneer cracked and something cold and cruel leaked through. "So you think you can trap me with this pregnancy lie?" Emily's smile faltered. "What, Jack, what are you talking about?" I was moving faster now, 15 feet. "Don't play innocent." Jack grabbed her arm. His father stepped closer, blocking her other side. "I know exactly what you're trying to do." "Let go of me." Emily tried to pull away, but Jack's grip tightened. "You're hurting me." 10 feet. I could see it now, the calculation in their eyes. The way Senator Bradford positioned himself to block Emily's escape. The way Jack glanced at his father, some silent communication passing between them. "Jack, please." Emily's voice rose, panic creeping in. "I'm actually pregnant. This isn't a lie. I took 3 tests. I went to the doctor." "Right." Jack's laugh was harsh, ugly. "And next you'll want half of my trust fund when you file for divorce. You think I'm stupid 5 feet. I opened my mouth to shout, to scream, to do something, but I was too late. In one swift motion, both of them pushed. Hard. Emily went over the railing backward. Her scream cut off sharp as she hit something the edge of the yacht, I realized later before the water took her. The sound was wrong. Too sharp. Like a melon hitting pavement. Then just the splash and the darkness and the sound of waves against the hull. I don't remember the last 5 feet. One moment I was walking, the next I had Jack's expensive jacket in my fists, shaking him. "What did you do?" My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like something feral, something broken. "What did you do?" Jack shoved me, hard. I stumbled backward, my 62-year-old body not as steady as it used to be. I caught myself against the railing before I fell. Senator Bradford adjusted his cufflinks. Actually adjusted his cufflinks like nothing had happened. His voice was calm, measured the same tone I'd heard him use on news programs. "She'll swim to shore, Mrs. Sullivan. It's only half a mile. Teaches her a lesson about lying to get her hands on family money." I stared at him, at this man who'd just watched his son throw a pregnant woman off a yacht, who stood there now like he'd done nothing more troubling than swat a fly. "She's pregnant." I was screaming now past caring who heard. "The water is 45 degrees. She can't swim in that. She'll die. She'll die." Jack laughed. Actually laughed. "Pregnant, right. Next she'll claim the baby's mine and ask for child support. I've seen women like her before. Gold diggers who think a fake pregnancy test will lock down a fortune." Something inside me snapped. I ran to the bulkhead where the life preserver hung. Senator Bradford stepped in front of me. "Mr. Sullivan, I suggest you calm down. This is a private family matter." I was 5'4". He was 6'2". He outweighed me by 100 pounds. But I'd spent 40 years in a male-dominated profession learning to hold my ground. I looked him in the eye. "Get out of my way." Something in my voice must have surprised him because he stepped aside, just slightly, just enough. I grabbed the life preserver and hurled it as far as I could into the darkness where Emily had fallen. It hit the water with a splash I couldn't even see. The yacht's lights only illuminated about 20 feet of churning black water. Beyond that, nothing. Just darkness and the Atlantic Ocean stretching to the horizon. "Emily!" I screamed into that darkness. "Emily, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the slap of waves against the hull and the jazz music still playing from the speakers. Someone inside the yacht laughed at a joke. My hands shook so badly I could barely pull my phone from my purse. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "Person overboard." The words came out steady somehow. Architect's training, maybe. When there's a structural failure, you don't panic. You assess. You act. "My daughter. She's 4 months pregnant. They threw her off a yacht. The water is freezing. She'll die." "Ma'am, slow down. Where are you located?" I gave the coordinates I'd memorized before we left shore. Always prepare. Always know your exits. Habits from a lifetime of careful living. We're half a mile off Martha's Vineyard. The yacht is the Providence registered to Senator William Bradford. My daughter is Emily Bradford, 26 years old. She's been in the water. I checked my watch. My hands were still shaking. 3 minutes now, maybe 4. Coast Guard is being dispatched. Ma'am, I need you to stay on the line. Keep watching the water. Call out to her. If she can hear you, it might help her stay conscious. So I stood there at that railing and screamed my daughter's name until my voice was raw. Behind me, I heard Jack's voice, casual as discussing the weather. Dramatic as always. She's probably already on shore planning her next manipulation. I turned. Mrs. Eleanor Gibson stood there, the elderly woman I'd been chatting with earlier. She was 70 if she was a day, with kind eyes and pearl earrings that had probably been her grandmother's. "My dear," she said quietly, "why didn't you jump in after her?" The guilt hit like a physical blow. "I can't swim well. The water's too cold, too rough. If I go in, we'll both die. The Coast Guard said—" My voice broke. "They said to stay here. Keep watching. Keep calling." But even as I said it, the weight of it crushed me. My daughter was out there in the freezing Atlantic, and I was standing on this deck doing nothing. Mrs. Gibson took my hand. Hers was warm, papery with age, surprisingly strong. "You did the right thing. You got help. You threw her something to hold on to. You're doing everything you can." I gripped her hand like a lifeline and kept screaming Emily's name into the darkness. 20 minutes passed, the longest 20 minutes of my life. Then 40. My voice was gone. Just a hoarse croak now when I called for Emily. The Coast Guard helicopter appeared, searchlights sweeping across the black water. The sound of the rotors was deafening, beautiful, terrifying. I watched those lights search. Back and forth, back and forth. Jack and Senator Bradford had gone below deck. I could see them through the cabin windows talking to other guests, smiling. Jack gestured with his champagne glass. Someone laughed. They were telling people Emily had decided to go for a night swim, that she was always impulsive like that. Probably already back on shore at the marina. Some guests looked uncertain. Others nodded, accepting the story. Why wouldn't they? Senator Bradford was a pillar of the community. His son was a successful businessman. What reason would they have to lie Mrs. Gibson never left my side? An hour passed, then 90 minutes. My phone rang. The Coast Guard. "Mrs. Sullivan, we've located her." I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. "Is she—" The words stuck in my throat. "Alive, barely. Severe hypothermia, head trauma. She's unconscious. We need to get her to Mass General immediately. Medical helicopter is on the way." "I'm coming with her." "Ma'am, you need to stay with the yacht. Coast Guard investigators will need your statement. This is now an active crime scene." "That's my daughter." "I understand. But if you leave now, the people responsible will control the narrative. You're the only witness who saw what actually happened. We need your testimony." The operator was right. I knew she was right. But watching them lift Emily from the water in that rescue basket, watching my baby girl's blue-gray face, her purple lips, the blood matted in her blonde hair from where she'd hit the yacht, and not being able to go with her was the hardest thing I'd ever done. A young Coast Guard officer approached me. Couldn't have been more than 28. Nervous eyes. Notebook already out. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to get your statement about what happened." I told him everything, slowly, carefully, like I was describing a building schematic. Every detail mattered. The whispered conversations between Jack and his father all evening. Emily's phone call that morning about the pregnancy. Jack's immediate call to his father. The way they'd positioned her at the railing. The exact words, "Trap me with this pregnancy lie." The deliberate push. The laughter. The officer's pen moved across the page, but his expression grew more uncomfortable with every sentence. "Mrs. Sullivan, you understand these are very serious accusations. Senator Bradford is, well, he's a United States Senator. This will be complicated. More complicated than attempted murder. I'm just saying we'll need significant evidence. His lawyers are probably already on their way. People like the Bradfords, they have resources, connections. Are you telling me that being rich and powerful means you can throw a pregnant woman off a yacht and face no consequences? No, ma'am. I'm telling you it means they'll use every resource they have to avoid consequences. We need your testimony to be absolutely accurate. We can't give them any room to claim you're mistaken or biased." I met his eyes. Officer, I spent 40 years as an architect. I had to be twice as good as my male colleagues to be taken half as seriously. I learned to be precise, to document everything, to leave no room for doubt. I pulled out my phone. I took photos earlier in the evening, time-stamped. You can see Jack and Senator Bradford in conversation looking at Emily. I have the exact time I called 911 9:47 p.m. I can tell you what everyone was wearing who was standing where who might have seen or heard what happened. His eyebrows rose. That's very thorough. I'm a mother officer. When you raise a daughter alone, you learn to pay attention. It was 3 in the morning when I finally made it to Massachusetts General Hospital. The Coast Guard had kept me for hours, going over my statement again and again, making sure every detail was documented, photographed, recorded. By the time they released me, my voice was gone. My hands had stopped shaking but felt numb, disconnected. I moved through the hospital corridors like a ghost. The ICU waiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and bad coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A television in the corner played the news on mute. And there, sitting in the plastic chairs like they owned the place, were 2 men in expensive suits. Lawyers. They stopped talking when I entered. One of them, 50-ish, silver-tongued look about him, stood up. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm James Fletcher, representing the Bradford family. We're deeply concerned about Mrs. Bradford's unfortunate accident. It wasn't an accident. And Senator Bradford wants you to know that he and his son are cooperating fully with the authorities. However, we would caution you against making inflammatory statements that could constitute defamation. I stared at him, at his $1,000 suit and his practiced sympathetic expression, at the threat wrapped in concern. Get away from me, I said quietly. Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you're upset, but I stood up, all 5 feet 4 inches of me. I looked at James Fletcher, and I thought about my daughter lying somewhere in this hospital fighting for her life. Fighting for a pregnancy that might already be lost. I didn't say anything, just looked at him. Something in my eyes must have warned him because he stepped back. We'll be in touch, he said, and retreated to his colleague. A doctor approached, young Asian, exhausted. Her badge read, Dr. Linda Foster. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm treating your daughter. I couldn't speak, just nodded. Emily is in critical condition, but she's stable. She has severe hypothermia, a concussion, and aspiration pneumonia from the water she inhaled. We've got her on a ventilator and warming protocols. The next 48 hours are crucial. The baby? The words came out as a whisper. Dr. Foster's expression softened. It's too early to tell. The trauma, the hypothermia, the stress on her body. We're monitoring very closely. I'm sorry I can't give you better news right now. I sank into one of those plastic chairs. It was the same kind of chair I'd sat in 20 years ago when my husband died. Same uncomfortable plastic, same squeak when you shifted your weight. Same feeling of the world ending around you while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Dr. Foster squeezed my shoulder. You can see her in a few minutes, just for a moment. When they finally let me into Emily's room, I almost didn't recognize her. Tubes everywhere. Machines breathing for her, beeping steadily. Her face was still gray-blue lips, still purple. Someone had cleaned the blood from her hair, but I could see the bandages covering the head wound. She looked so small in that hospital bed, like the 8-year-old girl who'd climbed into my bed the night we buried her father, too scared to sleep alone. I took her hand. It was cold. So cold. I'm here, baby, I whispered. Mama's here. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. The machines beeped. The ventilator hissed. She didn't move. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time didn't work right anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't contacted in 2 years. Thomas. Just saw the news. Martha's Vineyard yacht incident. Woman rescued from Atlantic. That's Emily, isn't it? My brother. My older brother, who I hadn't spoken to since a stupid argument about Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. An argument so trivial I couldn't even remember what it was about now. I stared at the message. Then, with shaking hands, I called him. He answered on the first ring. Donna, that voice. Gruff, careful, worried. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. Tommy! I hadn't called him that since we were kids. I need your help. Silence. Then, what happened? I told him everything. My voice stayed level somehow, controlled. Like I was describing a building design instead of my daughter's attempted murder. The morning phone call, the whispered conversations, the deliberate push. The laughter. 3 hours in the Atlantic. Emily in the ICU fighting for her life. When I finished, there was a long pause. These people, Thomas said finally, his voice carefully controlled. You're talking about Senator William Bradford, one of the most powerful men in Massachusetts, probably running for governor next year. I know who he is, Tommy. Donna, he has connections everywhere. Every agency, every courthouse. If we go after him... They threw my pregnant daughter off a yacht and left her to die. My voice cracked. I don't care about his connections. Another pause. I could almost hear him thinking, weighing options the way he used to when we were kids, and I'd come to him with a problem. Where are you right now? Mass General, ICU waiting room. Okay, listen to me carefully. Don't talk to any more lawyers. Don't talk to police without me present. Don't talk to anyone about the case. I'm leaving Vermont now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Tommy, I'm not doing this for you, Donna. The words stung, but I understood. We hadn't parted on good terms. I'm doing it for Emily, he continued. That little girl sent me a birthday card last year, even though you and I weren't speaking. She wrote me a note about missing her Uncle Tommy. She didn't have to do that. My throat tightened. I'd forgotten about that. Emily had asked for his address, said she wanted to send him a card. I'd given it to her without comment, nursing my own hurt feelings. She'd tried to bridge the gap we were both too stubborn to cross. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet. If what you told me is true, this is going to get ugly. The Bradfords will use every resource they have to bury this. Are you prepared for that? I looked through the glass window into Emily's room, at the machines breathing for her, at the monitors tracking her failing vital signs, at my daughter who'd done nothing wrong except marry the wrong man and try to build a family. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. We don't react. We don't make accusations. We appear to believe their accident story. We play nice. I can't. Yes, you can't then. Because while they think we're backing down, I'm going to dig. I'm going to find out everything about William Bradford's past. Every business deal, every relationship, every skeleton in every closet. And when I'm done, Donna, we're going to destroy him. The certainty in his voice should have scared me. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground I'd stood on since watching Emily disappear into that black water. Okay, I said. Okay. I'll be there in 3 hours. Try to get some rest. Tommy, I'm sorry. About Thanksgiving. About the fight. About Zoom. We'll talk about that later. Right now we focus on Emily. Everything else can wait. He hung up. I sat in that plastic chair holding my phone and felt something shift inside me. The helpless terror of the past 6 hours began to crystallize into something harder. Something cold and determined. Jack and Senator Bradford thought they'd solved their problem. Thought they could throw my daughter away like trash and face no consequences. They were wrong. I must have dozed off in the chair because I jerked awake to a hand on my shoulder. Dr. Foster stood over me. The clock on the wall read 6:15 a.m. Mrs. Sullivan? I was on my feet instantly, my heart hammering. Is she... Emily's still stable, but I need to talk to you about the pregnancy. I knew. Before she said another word, I knew. I'm so sorry. The trauma, the hypothermia, the stress on her body. It was too much. Emily has lost the baby. The words didn't feel real. They floated in the air between us like something from a dream, a nightmare. You're sure? I'm sure. I'm so very sorry. I sat back down. My legs just gave out. My grandchild. Gone. Emily's baby. The baby she'd been so excited about that morning, was it only yesterday morning, the baby she'd wanted so badly, the baby that Jack had called a lie, a trap, a scheme for money. That baby was gone. Dr. Foster was still talking. Something about Emily's condition, about monitoring, about support services. I heard the words, but they didn't connect to anything. All I could think about was Emily's voice on the phone yesterday. Mom, I told him about the baby. And Jack's voice as he pushed her, trap me with this pregnancy lie. Something inside me broke then. Not cracked. Broke completely. Whatever mercy I might have felt gone. Whatever impulse toward forgiveness dead. Whatever part of me that believed in turning the other cheek, in letting the justice system handle things and being the better person, shattered. They had killed my grandchild. They had nearly killed my daughter. They were sitting in their mansion right now. probably sleeping peacefully, confident that their money and power and connections would protect them. I pulled out my phone and texted Thomas one word: war. His response came immediately: "Good. I'll be there in an hour." The sun was rising over Boston when Thomas walked into the ICU waiting room. He looked older than I remembered. His hair had gone mostly gray. Lines I didn't remember creased his face. But those eyes, sharp, intelligent, missing nothing, those were the same. We looked at each other for a long moment. 2 years of silence and stubbornness between us. Then he held out his arms, and I walked into them and let myself cry for the first time since Emily went over that railing. He didn't say anything, just held me while I sobbed into his jacket. Patient, steady the way he'd been when we were kids, and I'd scraped my knee or failed a test or had my heart broken. When I finally pulled back, he handed me a handkerchief, actual cloth like our father used to carry. "Tell me again," he said. "Every detail. Don't leave anything out." So I did. This time I added things I hadn't told the Coast Guard. How I'd noticed Jack and Senator Bradford watching Emily all evening with those calculating expressions. How Emily had told me Jack called his father immediately after learning about the pregnancy. How the senator had smiled, actually smiled, after they pushed her. Thomas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said finally. "Here's what we're dealing with. Senator William Bradford has been in politics for 30 years. He's wealthy, connected, and very, very careful. If he did this, if he deliberately tried to harm Emily, he's done it before." "What do you mean?" "Men like him don't just suddenly decide to commit violence. There's always a pattern, a history. We need to find it." "How odd." "I still have friends at the Bureau. I know journalists who owe me favors, people who aren't afraid of going after powerful men." He looked at me steadily. "But Donna, you need to understand something. If we do this, we're declaring war. The Bradfords will come after us with everything they have. Our finances, our reputations, maybe even our safety. Are you sure?" I thought about Emily lying in that hospital bed. I thought about my grandchild who would never be born. I thought about Jack laughing as my daughter drowned. "I'm sure." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then here's the plan. First, we don't react. We appear to believe their story that it was an accident. We play nice. Can you do that?" "I don't think you have to, because while they think we're backing down, I'm going to dig. I'm going to find out everything about William Bradford's past. Every deal, every relationship, every secret. And when I'm done, we're going to destroy him. Completely. But we only get one shot at this. If we come at him before we have ironclad evidence, his lawyers will bury us. So we wait. We plan. We build an airtight case. How long? Weeks. Maybe months. It depends on what I find." I looked at Emily's room. My daughter who'd almost died because she'd married into the wrong family. My daughter who'd have to wake up and learn she'd lost her baby. "I can wait," I said. "I've been patient my whole life, Tommy. I can be patient a little longer." "Good." He pulled out a laptop from his bag. "I'm going to start digging right now. First place to look, Bradford's previous marriages. Men who are violent toward women usually have a pattern. Previous marriages, I thought Jack's mother died when Jack was 10, but that was Bradford's second wife. He was married before that, 24 years ago. She died too. Fell down the stairs at their summer home." The way he said it made my skin crawl. "You think?" "I think it's worth investigating. A man's first wife dies in a tragic accident. 20 years later, his son tries to kill his pregnant wife. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern." He opened his laptop and started typing. Within minutes, he'd pulled up news articles from 2004. "Senator's wife dies in tragic accident. Victoria Hale Bradford, 38, dies after fall at Nantucket home," I read over his shoulder. The articles were brief, respectful. Tragic accident. Beloved wife, survived by husband Senator William Bradford and 10-year-old son Jack. Private funeral, in lieu of flowers donations to the American Heart Association. Fell down the stairs, Thomas muttered, scanning the articles. Head trauma. Found by Senator Bradford the next morning. Quick investigation ruled accidental. "You think he killed her?" "I think we need to find out." He was already making notes, names, dates. "I need to track down the medical examiner who did her autopsy. Find the investigating officers. See if there's anyone who thought the death was suspicious but got shut down." A nurse appeared at Emily's door. Mrs. Sullivan, your daughter is waking up. I was on my feet instantly. Emily's eyes fluttered open as I reached her bedside. Confused, disoriented. The ventilator tube had been removed at some point. Mom? Her voice was barely a whisper. I grabbed her hand, careful of the IV lines. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. Her eyes focused slowly. I watched memory flood back in the yacht, the push, the water. Jack, she whispered. They pushed me. Mom, they pushed me. I know. I saw it. We're taking care of it. Her free hand moved to her stomach. The question in her eyes broke my heart. The baby, I couldn't find the words. Couldn't make myself say them. She saw it in my face. No. Tears started streaming down her cheeks. No, no, no. The monitors started beeping. Nurses rushed in. I need you to step out, Mrs. Sullivan, one of them said firmly. I was ushered into the hallway while they sedated Emily, calmed her down. Through the window, I watched my daughter sob, watched the nurses try to comfort her, watched her world fall apart. Thomas appeared beside me. He didn't say anything, just stood there solid and steady. They took everything from her, I said. Her husband, her baby, her trust in people. Everything. Then we take everything from them, Thomas said quietly. And we make sure they can never hurt anyone again. I looked at my brother, at the determination in his eyes. How do we start? He pulled out his phone, showed me a name, Dr. James Whitfield, medical examiner, retired. We start, he said, by finding out the truth about Victoria Bradford's death. And we don't stop until we've uncovered every secret the Bradfords have buried. Thomas stayed. For the next 3 days, he practically lived in that ICU waiting room with me. He brought me coffee that actually tasted like coffee, not the hospital sludge from the vending machine. He made sure I ate, even when I had no appetite. And while I sat by Emily's bedside, he worked. I'd forgotten how focused my brother could be when he was on a case. Back when he was with the FBI, his colleagues used to joke that Thomas Sullivan could find a needle in a haystack, then find out who put the needle there, why they did it, and what else they were hiding. Watching him now hunched over his laptop in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, I remembered why the Bureau had been so reluctant to let him retire. On the 4th morning, Emily was stable enough to be moved out of the ICU. They put her in a private room on the 7th floor. It had a window that looked out over Boston, and the morning sun made everything look almost hopeful. Almost. Emily hadn't spoken much since waking up. She'd cry sometimes silent tears that broke my heart more than screaming would have. Mostly she just stared at the wall, one hand resting on her flat stomach. I was sitting beside her bed holding her other hand when Thomas knocked softly on the door. Can I come in? Emily's eyes flickered. Uncle Tommy. He walked in and something in Emily's expression shifted. She'd always loved her Uncle Tommy. When she was little, he used to visit every Sunday with presents and terrible jokes and piggyback rides that made her shriek with laughter. Then he and I had our stupid fight, and she'd lost that too. Hey, Em, he said softly, sitting in the chair on her other side. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. They killed my baby, Uncle Tommy. They threw me off the boat, and they killed my baby. I know, sweetheart. I know. He took her free hand. And they're going to pay for it. Your mom and I are going to make sure of that. How? Her voice was bitter, broken. They're rich. They're powerful. Senator Bradford knows everyone. He'll make this go away like it never happened. Thomas and I exchanged a look. Maybe, Thomas said. Or maybe we're going to dig up so much dirt on him that all the money and connections in the world won't save him. Emily's eyes sharpened slightly. What do you mean? I mean, Thomas said carefully, that men like William Bradford don't just wake up one day and decide to hurt people. They have a pattern, a history, and I'm very good at finding patterns. Tell her, I said. Tell her what you found. Thomas pulled out his laptop, set it on the rolling tray table. Emily, what do you know about Jack's mother? She died when he was 10. Cancer, I think Jack never liked talking about her. Not cancer, Thomas said. She fell down the stairs at their summer home in Nantucket, died from head trauma. Emily frowned. I didn't know that. Her name was Victoria Hale Bradford. She was 38 years old, and according to the autopsy report I'm trying to get my hands on, she was 12 weeks pregnant when she died. The room went silent. I watched understanding dawn in Emily's eyes. Oh my God, she whispered. 24 years ago, Thomas continued, Senator Bradford's pregnant wife died in what was ruled a tragic accident. 24 years later, his son tries to kill his pregnant wife. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Can you prove it? Emily asked. I'm working on it. I've tracked down the medical examiner who did Victoria's autopsy, Dr. James Whitfield. He's retired now, living in Fort Lauderdale. I'm flying down tomorrow to talk to him. Why would he talk to you after all this time? Thomas smiled grimly. Because according to a mutual friend at the Bureau, Dr. Whitfield has been carrying guilt about that case for 24 years. Sometimes people want to tell the truth. They're just waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Thomas left for Florida that afternoon. I stayed with Emily, who was getting stronger physically, but seemed to be withdrawing further into herself emotionally. The Bradfords sent gifts, expensive fruit baskets that must have cost $200, flowers so elaborate they looked like they belonged at a funeral, a card from Senator Bradford expressing his deepest sympathies for this unfortunate incident. I threw them all away. Jack's lawyer, James Fletcher, called my phone 6 times. I didn't answer. On the 7th call, he left a voicemail. Mrs. Sullivan, we need to discuss the situation. Senator Bradford and Jack are willing to cover all of Emily's medical expenses as a gesture of goodwill. They're also prepared to offer a settlement to help with her recovery. Please call me back so we can arrange a meeting. I played it for Emily. They're trying to buy us off, she said flatly. Yes? Are you going to take it? I looked at my daughter, at the bandages still covering her head wound, at the haunted look in her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. No, I said. We're not taking anything from them except what the law gives us, and we're not stopping until they're in prison. Emily's hand found mine. I should have listened to you, Mom. You never trusted Jack. You tried to warn me. Sweetheart, you wanted to believe in love. That's not wrong. It almost killed me. But it didn't. You're alive. You're strong. And we're going to make sure they can never hurt anyone else. For the first time since waking up, Emily smiled. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Uncle Tommy taught you to be ruthless, didn't he? Uncle Tommy taught me that sometimes the only way to stop bad people is to hit them where it hurts, and your uncle is very good at finding where it hurts. Thomas called that evening. I stepped into the hallway to take it. You were right, he said without preamble. Doctor, Whitfield has been waiting 24 years for someone to ask about Victoria Bradford. My pulse quickened. What did he say? He's willing to go on record. Donna the man kept copies of everything. Autopsy photos, his personal notes, everything the official report left out. What did the official report leave out? Victoria Bradford had defensive wounds on her arms, bruises consistent with being grabbed and shaken. The head trauma didn't match a fall down carpeted stairs. It matched being struck with a blunt object and then pushed. I closed my eyes. He killed her. Dr. Whitfield thinks so. But he was 54 years old with a family when he did that autopsy. Bradford's people made it very clear sign off on accidental death or lose everything. He chose his family's security over the truth. He's been living with that guilt ever since. Will he testify? He will. And Donna? There's something else. Victoria was beaten before. Doctor, Whitfield found evidence of old fractures, healed bruises. William Bradford had been abusing his wife for years. My hand tightened on the phone. Jack grew up watching his father abuse his mother, then murder her, and learned that rich, powerful men can get away with anything, Thomas finished. I'm flying back tomorrow. We need to talk about next steps. After we hung up, I stood in that hospital hallway for a long time processing what I'd learned. Emily's husband hadn't just tried to kill her on impulse. He'd grown up in a house where violence against women was normal, where pregnancy made a woman expendable, where money and power meant you could commit murder and walk away clean. The question now was, could we prove it? Thomas returned 2 days later with a file folder thick with documents. We spread them out in the hospital cafeteria, an awful space that smelled like burned coffee and industrial cleaner. Doctor, Whitfield gave me everything, Thomas said, laying out autopsy photos I had to force myself to look at. Victoria Bradford's body, the bruises, the wounds. But it's not enough. 24 years have passed. Bradford's lawyers will argue the investigation was thorough, the death was ruled accidental by proper authorities, and we're trying to retry a closed case. So what do we need? A pattern. 1 victim could be explained away. 2 starts to look like coincidence. 3 or more. That's a pattern no jury can ignore. He pulled out another file. So I started digging into Bradford's history. Political campaign staff turnover, anything that might indicate a problem. And 15 years ago, during his second Senate campaign, his campaign manager filed a police report. Sexual assault against Senator William Bradford. My stomach turned. What happened to the report? Disappeared. Literally vanished from the police database. But I have a friend who's very good with computer forensics. He found a backup copy buried in an old server. Thomas opened his laptop, pulled up a scanned document. Patricia Reynolds. She was 33, running Bradford's campaign. One night, working late at campaign headquarters, Bradford assaulted her. She went to the police the next morning. I read the report. The clinical language couldn't hide the horror of what had happened. 2 days later, Thomas continued, the detective handling her case called and said there was insufficient evidence to proceed. The report was removed from official records. 3 days after that, Bradford's lawyer contacted Patricia with an offer, $200,000 and an NDA. She took it. She was terrified. They showed her photos of her at bars, made subtle threats about her reputation, her career. She was 33 years old, single, scared. So yes, she took the money and moved away. She's in Portland, Oregon now. Married, 2 kids, runs a nonprofit. Will she talk to us? I called her yesterday. Told her what happened to Emily. Told her we have other victims willing to come forward. He paused. She said she's been waiting 15 years for someone to give her permission to tell the truth. That evening, Thomas set up a video call with Patricia Reynolds. Emily wanted to be part of it, so we gathered in her hospital room laptop balanced on the tray table. When Patricia's face appeared on screen, I saw a woman who'd learned to hide her scars well. Professional, composed with the kind smile of someone who'd turned pain into purpose. Emily, she said softly, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Emily's jaw tightened. Thank you for agreeing to talk to us. I should have spoken up 15 years ago. If I had Patricia's voice broke. Maybe this wouldn't have happened to you. It's not your fault, Emily said firmly. They're the ones who did this, not you. Patricia wiped her eyes. Thank you for saying that. I've spent 15 years wondering if staying silent made me complicit in whatever else he did. Tell us what happened, Thomas said gently. So she did. The whole story, holding nothing back. Working late, Bradford coming back to the office, the assault going to the police, watching her report, disappear, the payoff, the NDA, the 15 years of silence and guilt. By the time she finished, Emily was crying. I was holding her hand so tight, my knuckles were white. I want to help, Patricia said. Whatever you need. I'll break the NDA. I'll testify. I'll go public. I'm done being silent. It won't be easy, Thomas warned. Bradford's lawyers will come after you. They'll try to discredit you, claim you're lying for money or attention. They'll dig into every aspect of your life. Let them, Patricia said. I've built a good life. I have a husband who knows everything and supports me. I have work that matters. They can't threaten any of that anymore. And if going public helps put that monster in prison, it's worth it. After the call ended, Emily looked at me. How many women do you think he's hurt? I don't know, sweetheart. We need to find them. All of them. We need to give them the chance. Patricia just got the chance to tell the truth. Thomas was already typing. I'm on it. Give me a week. While Thomas searched for more victims, I turned my attention to understanding why Jack had done what he did. Money seemed obvious, but I needed details. I called an old colleague from my architecture days, Margaret Price. She'd married a lawyer who specialized in trusts and estates. If anyone could help me understand Jack's financial situation, it would be her husband. Donna, Margaret's voice was warm, concerned. I heard about Emily. How is she? Recovering. Margaret, I need a favor. I need to understand how trust funds work, specifically ones that vest at a certain age. There was a pause. This is about Jack Bradford's trust fund, isn't it? You know about it? Honey, everyone in certain Boston circles knows about it. The Bradford fortune is legendary, and the terms of Jack's trust are an open secret among estate lawyers. Can you explain it to me in plain English? Hold on, let me get Richard. A minute later, Richard Price was on the line. Mrs. Sullivan, Margaret filled me in. I can't give you specific information about the Bradford Trust without violating privilege, but I can explain how these types of trusts typically work. Please. High net worth families often create trusts for their children with specific vesting ages, usually 35 or 40. The money is held in trust until that age, then transferred to the beneficiary. In Jack's case, his trust would have been funded by his grandfather's estate. How much are we talking about? Again, I can't confirm specific amounts, but the Bradford family wealth is estimated in the hundreds of millions. A grandchild's trust could easily be in the 40 to 60 million range. My breath caught. $40 million? Possibly. Now here's where it gets interesting. Many of these trusts include spousal provisions. If the beneficiary is married when the trust vests, the spouse may be entitled to a portion in the event of divorce. How much? Typically 50% of the trust principal if the marriage has lasted at least 2 years and produced children. It's meant to protect against situations where someone marries purely for money, but it also protects spouses who've built a life with the beneficiary. I did the math. So if Jack's trust is $40 million and he's married with children, when it vests, Emily would be entitled to $20 million if they divorced. Plus child support from his remaining $20 million, Richard added. We're talking about a very substantial sum. After I hung up, I sat in Emily's room watching her sleep. She looked peaceful for the first time in days. $20 million. Jack had tried to kill her over $20 million. Thomas returned to Boston a week later with news. I found 3 more women, he said. Different circumstances, but same pattern. Bradford used his power to abuse them, then paid them off and made them sign NDAs. He laid out the files. Jessica Martinez, former intern, assaulted in 2012, paid $150,000. Sarah Kim, former aide, assaulted in 2007, paid $175,000. Diane Foster, former secretary, assaulted in 2001, paid $125,000. They're all willing to come forward, Thomas said. All of them have been carrying this guilt and anger for years. When I told them about Emily, about Patricia, about having the chance to finally tell the truth, they didn't hesitate. I looked at the files spread across my small kitchen table. 5 women, 5 victims of William Bradford's violence and abuse. Is it enough? I asked. It's a start, but I found something else. Something that proves Jack's attempt on Emily's life was premeditated. He pulled out his laptop, opened a document. I have a contact who used to work in cybersecurity, called in a favor. We were able to obtain Jack's email correspondence and search history from 3 weeks before Emily told him about the pregnancy. That's legal. Thomas gave me a look. It's legally gray, but it won't matter because I'm also going to get a warrant for the same information through proper channels. This just tells us what to look for. What did you find? He turned the laptop toward me. Email after email between Jack and his attorney discussing the trust fund, discussing the prenuptial agreement, discussing whether pregnancy could trigger the spousal provision. Then the search history. My blood ran cold as I read, How to Induce Miscarriage Naturally. Accidents that cause pregnancy loss. Cold water exposure pregnancy. Legal definition of accidental death. How to break a prenuptial agreement. He'd been planning this, I whispered. Before Emily even knew she was pregnant, he was already planning how to get rid of her if she became pregnant. 3 weeks of research, Thomas confirmed. He knew the trust fund vested in 8 months. He knew Emily becoming pregnant would cost him $20 million, so he started researching ways to solve the problem. Emily appeared in the doorway. She was staying with me now, recovering, getting stronger every day. She looked at the laptop screen, read the search history. Her face went white, then red. That son of a bitch. I loved him. I wanted to build a family with him, and he was Googling ways to kill our baby. Emily, I started. No, her voice was hard, cold. I'm done being sad. I'm done crying. He killed our baby mom. He threw me off a yacht to die. And he planned it. He calculated it. He researched it like it was just another business transaction. She looked at Thomas. What do we need to do to make sure he goes to prison? To make sure his father goes to prison? What do we need? Thomas smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We need to make them nervous. Nervous enough to make mistakes, and I think it's time to start. Thomas had connections everywhere. 25 years with the FBI meant he knew journalists, investigators, lawyers, people who owed him favors. He started making calls. First to his friend at the Boston Globe, Michael Torres. Michael was an investigative journalist who'd made his career exposing corruption in Massachusetts politics. He'd been trying to dig into Senator Bradford's past for years, but could never find anyone willing to go on record. Now he had 5 women ready to talk. Second to Detective Sarah Morrison at the Massachusetts State Police. Sarah was 42, had been with the force for 20 years, and had a reputation for not being afraid of powerful people. She'd investigated 3 state representatives, 2 judges, and 1 congressman. All of them were now in prison. When Thomas told her about Victoria Bradford's death, about Patricia Reynolds, and the other victims, about Emily, Sarah's response was immediate. "Get me everything you have. I'm opening an investigation." Third to his former colleagues at the FBI, Financial Crimes Division. Because while Thomas was digging into Bradford's past, he'd noticed some interesting patterns in the senator's campaign finance reports. Donations that exceeded legal limits, offshore accounts that didn't quite add up, shell corporations that existed only on paper. Nothing concrete yet, but enough to make people curious, enough to start asking questions. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Emily went off that yacht, everything happened at once. The Boston Globe published its story. Questions surround Senator Bradford's past. First wife's death under new scrutiny. Former staff members. Alleged pattern of abuse. The article was careful. No direct accusations, just questions. Why had Victoria Bradford's death been ruled accidental so quickly? Why were there inconsistencies in the autopsy report? Why had multiple women filed complaints against Bradford over the years, only to have those complaints disappear? By noon, it was the top story on every news channel in Massachusetts. By 2 p.m., Senator Bradford was holding a press conference. I watched it with Emily and Thomas in my living room. Bradford stood at a podium, American flag behind him that practiced politicians' expression of grave concern on his face. "These allegations are completely baseless," he said, voice steady, measured. "My first wife's death was a tragic accident investigated thoroughly by local authorities. I am saddened that someone would try to use my family's pain for political purposes." A reporter called out, "Senator, what about Patricia Reynolds? She's alleging sexual assault." "I have no idea who that woman is," Bradford said smoothly. "These appear to be politically motivated attacks timed to damage my upcoming gubernatorial campaign. I'm confident that when all the facts come out, my name will be cleared." "What about your daughter-in-law Emily Bradford's incident on your yacht?" Bradford's expression shifted to one of concern. "That was a horrible accident. Emily somehow fell overboard. My son and I did everything we could to help. Our hearts go out to Emily and her mother during this difficult time. We're cooperating fully with the Coast Guard investigation." He was good. Calm, sympathetic, believable. For a moment, I wondered if we had any chance at all. Then my phone buzzed. Text from Thomas, even though he was sitting right next to me. "Watch Channel 7, now." I switched channels. A press conference was starting. Patricia Reynolds stood at a podium, her husband beside her hand shaking slightly as she gripped the edges of the lectern. "My name is Patricia Reynolds," she said, voice wavering but determined. 15 years ago, I worked as campaign manager for William Bradford's Senate re-election campaign. During that time, he sexually assaulted me in his campaign office. The room exploded with camera flashes. When I reported it to police, my complaint disappeared. I was paid $200,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and stay silent. Today, with the help of legal counsel, I am breaking that agreement. Her voice grew stronger. Senator Bradford is a dangerous man who has used his power and wealth to silence his victims for decades. I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid of what he could do to my career, my reputation, my life. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when I know he's still hurting people. Not when I know his son nearly killed a pregnant woman just 3 weeks ago. She looked directly into the camera. "Emily Bradford, if you're watching this, I am so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I'm speaking up now, and I won't be silenced again." Emily was crying. I was crying. Even Thomas looked affected. "That's not all," he said quietly. He pulled up his laptop, showed me a press release from the Massachusetts State Police. State Police reopen investigation into Victoria Bradford's death. New evidence prompts review of 2004 Nantucket incident. Sarah Morrison convinced her captain to reopen the case, Thomas explained. Dr. Whitfield's testimony, combined with Patricia's allegations, was enough to justify a new investigation. My phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is Captain Robert Hayes, Coast Guard, retired. I was a guest on the yacht the night your daughter went overboard." My pulse quickened. Yes? I saw what happened. I saw Jack Bradford and his father deliberately push Emily. I tried to give a statement to investigators, but Bradford's lawyers got to me first. They threatened my pension, claimed I was drunk and misremembering. Why are you calling now? Because I'm 71 years old, ma'am. I've got nothing left to lose and a lot to atone for. I should have fought harder to tell the truth. I didn't, but I'm ready to testify now, publicly. I'll tell anyone who'll listen exactly what I saw. I closed my eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Just tell me when and where you need me. Over the next week, everything unraveled for the Bradfords. Jessica Martinez went on CNN and told her story. Sarah Kim wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. Diane Foster gave an interview to NPR. Each woman told the same story: Senator William Bradford had abused them, then paid them to stay silent. Each woman named specific dates, places, amounts, details that could be verified. The FBI announced they were opening an investigation into Senator Bradford's campaign finances. The Massachusetts State Police executed a warrant at the Nantucket house where Victoria Bradford had died, looking for evidence that had been missed 24 years ago. And through it all, Senator Bradford held press conference after press conference, denying everything, blaming political enemies, claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy. Nobody believed him. His colleagues in the Senate started distancing themselves. His campaign for governor collapsed. His fundraisers canceled. His phone stopped ringing. Jack was arrested on a Thursday morning. I was with Emily when we got the news. She was in my kitchen making tea, getting stronger every day. Thomas's laptop was open on the table, streaming the local news. The reporter stood outside Jack's Beacon Hill townhouse. FBI agents entered the residence approximately 15 minutes ago. We're now seeing Jack Bradford being let out in handcuffs. The camera zoomed in. Jack in expensive pajamas, looking terrified and smaller somehow without his suit and confidence. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. His face was pale. He didn't look like a powerful hedge fund manager anymore. He just looked like what he was, a scared man who'd finally been caught. Jack Bradford is being charged with attempted murder assault with intent to kill and reckless endangerment, the reporter continued. This stems from the September incident where his wife Emily Bradford went overboard from the family yacht and nearly died. Emily's hand found mine. We watched them put Jack in the back of an unmarked car and drive away. It's really happening, she whispered. He's really going to face consequences. We're not done yet, Thomas said. Jack's arrest is just the beginning. The big fish is still swimming. But not for long. 2 days later, Massachusetts State Police arrested Senator William Bradford. The charges were extensive first-degree murder in Victoria Hale Bradford's death, conspiracy to commit murder in Emily's case, multiple counts of obstruction of justice, sexual assault of Patricia Reynolds, and 3 other women. I watched his arrest on every news channel, watched this powerful, untouchable man be led out of his Senate office in handcuffs, watched his carefully constructed facade crumble. He held one last press conference, hands, shaking, voice cracking. This is a political witch hunt, he said. My enemies are trying to destroy me. I am innocent of all charges. When the truth comes out... Senator, a reporter shouted. Why did 3 different medical examiners confirm Victoria had defensive wounds? Bradford's face went white. He walked away without answering. His political career was over. His freedom was ending. And we were just getting started. 5 weeks after the yacht incident, Emily moved back into her own apartment. Not the one she'd shared with Jack. She'd never go back there. A new place, smaller, with big windows that let in lots of light. I helped her unpack boxes. She'd sold or donated everything that reminded her of Jack. The wedding photos, the expensive gifts from his family, even her wedding ring. I'm donating the ring money to a domestic violence shelter, she told me, carefully arranging books on a shelf. They need it more than I do. She was different now. Harder, wiser, but also somehow more herself. The woman who'd tried so hard to fit into the Bradford world was gone. In her place was someone stronger. The prosecutor called, she said. They want me to testify at Jack's trial, tell my story in court. How do you feel about that? She was quiet for a moment. Scared, but also ready. I need to look him in the eye and tell the truth about what he did. I need to make sure everyone knows he didn't just throw me off a yacht. He threw away our baby, our future, everything we could have been. You don't have to do this, sweetheart. You've been through enough. Yes, I do. She turned to face me. I need to do this for me, and for all the other women who might have ended up marrying into that family if we don't stop them now. I hugged her tight. My daughter, who'd almost died, who'd lost her baby, who'd been betrayed in the worst possible way. She was stronger than I'd ever imagined she could be. Thomas appeared in the doorway with coffee and pastries. Delivery for the Sullivan women. You're going to make me fat, Uncle Tommy, Emily said, but she took a croissant anyway. I have news, Thomas said. The FBI finished their analysis of Bradford's finances. Shell Corporation's offshore accounts donations laundered through fake donors. They're adding financial crimes to his charges. How much are we talking about? I asked. $35 million in illegal campaign contributions over 20 years. Tax evasion on at least $15 million more. The man has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a political career. Emily shook her head. All that money, all that power, and it still wasn't enough. They still had to hurt people. That's what people like the Bradfords never understand, Thomas said. Money and power don't make you untouchable. They just make the fall harder when you finally hit the ground. The next 2 months were a blur of preparations. Meetings with prosecutors, reviewing evidence, getting ready for trial. Thomas had built a case that was, in his words, tighter than a drum. He had Dr. Whitfield's testimony about Victoria's murder. He had Patricia Reynolds and 4 other women ready to testify about Bradford's pattern of abuse. He had Captain Hayes's eyewitness account of Emily being pushed. He had the financial evidence of Jack's motive, that $40 million trust fund. And he had Emily, who'd survived. The defense tried everything. They filed motions to suppress evidence, to separate the trials, to move venues. They claimed the investigation was politically motivated. They tried to paint Emily as unstable, manipulative, a gold digger. But Detective Sarah Morrison had done her job too well. Every piece of evidence was properly obtained. Every witness was credible. Every timeline matched. Jack's trial was scheduled for April, 8 months after that night on the yacht. Senator Bradford's trial would come after. On a cold February morning, I was in my apartment making coffee when someone knocked on my door. Mrs. Eleanor Gibson stood in the hallway, the elderly woman from the yacht. She held a casserole dish covered in foil. Mrs. Sullivan, I hope you don't mind my stopping by. I got your address from the Coast Guard. They're giving me updates since I'm a witness. Of course not. Please come in. She set the casserole on my counter. Chicken and rice, my grandmother's recipe. I thought you and Emily might enjoy it. That's very kind of you. We sat at my small kitchen table with coffee. Mrs. Gibson was quiet for a moment. Then I need to apologize. For what? I was on that yacht. I saw how Jack and the senator treated Emily all evening. I saw them watching her, whispering. And I did nothing. I said nothing. I'm 73 years old, Mrs. Sullivan. I've seen enough of life to recognize when something is wrong. And I stayed silent. You couldn't have known. I could have. I should have. And I'm sorry. She met my eyes. But I'm not staying silent now. I've given a full statement to the police. I told them everything I saw and heard that night. I'll testify at trial. Whatever you and Emily need, I'm here. After she left, I called Thomas. We have another witness, I said. Who? Eleanor Gibson. She's 73, wealthy, respected in Boston society. And she's going to testify that she saw Jack and Bradford acting suspicious all evening, that she heard them making threatening comments about Emily. Thomas whistled low. A credible society witness. That's gold Donna. Juries love sympathetic elderly witnesses. She's also got a spine of steel. She's not afraid of the Bradfords. April arrived with that particular Boston spring weather, cold rain one day, brilliant sunshine the next. As if the city itself couldn't decide what it felt. I knew exactly how it felt. Jack Bradford's trial was set to begin on a Monday. Emily and I arrived at the Suffolk County Superior Court at 8 in the morning, an hour before proceedings started. Thomas met us at the entrance. Ready? He asked Emily. She wore a simple navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back. The scar on her forehead had faded, but was still visible if you knew to look for it. She'd refused to cover it with makeup. I want them to see what he did, she told me that morning. I want the jury to see the evidence every time they look at me. My daughter had grown so much stronger, but I could see her hands shaking as she clutched her purse. I'm ready, she said. The courtroom was packed. Media in the back rows, sketch artists with their pads, members of the public who'd been waiting since dawn for a seat. This was the trial everyone in Massachusetts had been following for months. Jack sat at the defense table with his lawyers, 3 of them all in expensive suits. James Fletcher, who'd tried to intimidate me at the hospital, sat closest to Jack. Jack himself looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His expensive suit hung a bit loose on his frame. He didn't look at Emily when we walked in, didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead like we didn't exist. The prosecution table was simpler. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Morrison, no relation to Detective Morrison, but equally formidable, sat with 1 junior attorney and a paralegal. Sarah was 52, had been prosecuting cases for 25 years, and had never lost a murder trial. She'd told us she didn't plan to start now. Judge Patricia Brennan entered, and we all stood. She was 68 stern, known for running a tight courtroom and having 0 tolerance for wealthy defendants who thought the rules didn't apply to them. "Be seated," she said. "Counsel, are we ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah Morrison said. Defense James Fletcher stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin with jury selection." It took 3 days to select a jury. Fletcher used every challenge he had to eliminate anyone who might be sympathetic to Emily, anyone who'd experienced domestic violence, anyone who'd worked in healthcare or emergency services, anyone who seemed too educated or too aware. What he ended up with was a jury of 12 people who Sarah Morrison whispered to me are exactly the kind of people who think bad things only happen if you deserve them. But Sarah didn't seem worried. "Trust me," she said. "By the time I'm done, they'll understand exactly who deserves what." Thursday morning, opening statements. The courtroom was so packed that people stood along the back wall. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, Emily beside me, Thomas on her other side. Mrs. Eleanor Gibson sat behind us, her presence a quiet reminder that the Bradfords' own social circle had turned against them. Sarah Morrison stood and approached the jury box. She didn't carry notes, didn't need them. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and strong, "this is a case about greed, pure, simple, calculated greed." She walked slowly along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Jack Bradford sat to inherit $40 million. His grandfather had set up a trust fund that would vest that means be transferred to him on his 36th birthday. That birthday is in 3 months. She let that sink in. Jack Bradford was 35 years old, successful, wealthy in his own right. But $40 million, that's a different kind of wealth. That's generational wealth. That's never work again wealth. That's everything he'd ever wanted. She paused at the center of the jury box. There was just one problem. The trust fund had a clause. If Jack was married when the trust vested, and if that marriage produced children, his wife would be entitled to 50% of the trust in the event of divorce. $20 million. Sarah turned, pointed at Jack. On September 20th of last year, Jack Bradford's wife Emily told him she was pregnant. 4 months pregnant. Their baby would be born well before his 36th birthday, which meant Emily would have legal claim to half of his trust fund. She let the jury look at Jack. Let them see him sitting there, stone-faced, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. That same day, Jack called his father, Senator William Bradford. They talked for 47 minutes. That evening, they invited Emily and her mother, Donna Sullivan, aboard the family yacht for a party. Sarah's voice dropped, became almost conversational. 50 guests, music, champagne celebration. And at 9:47 p.m., Jack Bradford and his father cornered Emily at the stern of the yacht. They accused her of lying about the pregnancy, called her a gold digger. And then in front of witnesses, they grabbed her arms and pushed her over the railing into the Atlantic Ocean. She walked back to the prosecution table, picked up a photograph, showed it to the jury. "This is the ocean where Emily fell that night. Dark, cold, 45 degrees Fahrenheit, half a mile from shore. Emily Bradford spent 3 hours in that water before the Coast Guard pulled her out. She had severe hypothermia, a concussion aspiration pneumonia. She nearly died." Sarah's voice hardened. "And she lost her baby. The trauma, the cold, the stress, her body couldn't sustain the pregnancy. The baby died." Several jurors looked shocked. One woman's hand went to her mouth. Jack Bradford tried to commit murder to protect his inheritance. He calculated, he planned, and he executed. And if not for the Coast Guard's quick response and Emily's incredible will to live, he would have succeeded. She returned to the jury box. "Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear from witnesses who saw what happened. You're going to see evidence of Jack's planning emails, internet searches, financial documents. You're going to hear from doctors who treated Emily. From the Coast Guard who rescued her. From Emily herself. Sarah looked each juror in the eye one by one. And when you've heard all the evidence, I'm going to ask you to find Jack Bradford guilty. Guilty of attempted murder. Guilty of assault with intent to kill. Guilty of reckless endangerment. Because that's exactly what he is. Guilty. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Then James Fletcher stood. He was smooth, I'd give him that. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that practiced lawyer voice that sounded reasonable and concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a tragic case, but it's not a case of attempted murder. It's a case of a terrible accident that's been twisted into something it's not by a bitter, angry woman and her equally bitter mother. Emily's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed it. Emily Bradford, Fletcher continued, had been having marital problems for months. She and Jack were arguing frequently about money, about her spending habits, about their future. When she became pregnant, and yes, she was pregnant, we don't dispute that she saw it as a way to save her marriage, to trap Jack into staying with her. He walked to the jury box, his expression sympathetic. On the night of September 20th, Emily had been drinking. Multiple witnesses will testify to this. She was emotional, upset. She'd been arguing with Jack earlier that day, and at some point during the yacht party, she went to the stern railing. He paused for effect. Jack and his father saw her there. They were concerned. They went to check on her, and they saw Emily climb up onto the railing. Several jurors leaned forward. That's right. Emily climbed onto the railing herself. Jack and his father both reached out to grab her to pull her back, but Emily lost her balance. She fell, and in the chaos and darkness it appeared to Emily's mother, who was watching from a distance, that Jack and the senator had pushed her. Fletcher's voice became gentle, understanding. Donna Sullivan loves her daughter. Of course she does. And in that moment of terror, seeing her daughter fall, her mind created a narrative that made sense to her. She convinced herself that Jack and the senator had pushed Emily. She's been telling that story so many times for so many months that she's come to believe it herself. He shook his head sadly. But believing something doesn't make it true. The evidence will show that this was a tragic accident, nothing more. And Jack Bradford, who loved his wife, who was excited about becoming a father, has been falsely accused of a terrible crime because his mother-in-law can't accept the truth. Fletcher returned to the defense table. We ask that you listen to all the evidence with an open mind. Don't let sympathy for Emily's injuries cloud your judgment. Don't let the prosecution's emotional arguments override the facts. And when you've heard everything, we're confident you'll reach the only verdict the evidence supports, not guilty. He sat down. Emily was shaking. I could feel it through her hand in mine. He's lying, she whispered. Everything he just said was a lie. I know, sweetheart. The jury will know too. Just wait. Sarah Morrison turned to look at us, gave Emily a small, confident nod. The evidence would speak for itself. The prosecution called their first witness. The state calls Donna Sullivan. I walked to the witness stand, my heart pounding. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down, looked at the jury, tried to appear calm and confident, even though my hands were shaking. Sarah approached. Mrs. Sullivan, please tell the jury your relationship to Emily Bradford. I'm her mother. I raised her alone after my husband died when she was 8 years old. Were you present on the yacht the night of September 20th? Yes. Emily and I were both invited to the Bradford family's annual autumn party. Tell us what happened that evening. I took a breath and told the story I'd told 100 times by now. But this time I told it slowly, carefully, looking at each juror as I spoke. I described watching Jack and Senator Bradford whisper together all evening. How they kept looking at Emily with expressions I couldn't read. How they'd called her over to the stern railing away from the other guests to a darker part of the deck. I was about 30 feet away, I said. I could hear Jack's voice clearly. He said, so you think you can trap me with this pregnancy lie? Several jurors wrote notes. Emily told him it wasn't a lie, that she was actually pregnant. Jack grabbed her arm. His father stepped behind her, blocking her escape. I started running toward them, but I was 62 years old in heels. I wasn't fast enough. My voice broke. I didn't try to hide it. Jack and his father both grabbed Emily, and they pushed her, hard, over the railing. I saw it happen. I was watching the whole time. Mrs. Sullivan, Sarah said gently, the defense claims Emily climbed onto the railing herself. Is that what you saw? Absolutely not. Emily was terrified. She was trying to get away from them. They grabbed her and pushed her backward over that railing. What happened after Emily went over? I ran to the railing, screamed for help. Jack shoved me away. Senator Bradford said, and I quote, "She'll swim to shore. It's only half a mile. Teaches her a lesson about lying to get her hands on family money." More jurors writing notes. I described throwing the life preserver, calling 911, screaming Emily's name into the darkness, while Jack and his father went below deck and told guests Emily had gone for a swim. 3 hours, I said, looking directly at Jack. My daughter was in that freezing water for 3 hours because of what they did. Sarah showed me photos of Emily in the hospital, asked me to identify them. I did my voice steady, even though seeing those images again made me want to cry. Then it was Fletcher's turn to cross-examine. He approached with that sympathetic expression like he felt sorry for me. "Mrs. Sullivan, you love your daughter very much, don't you?" "Of course." "You'd do anything to protect her?" "Yes." "Including, perhaps, misremembering what you saw that night?" "I didn't misremember anything. I know exactly what I saw." "But you were 30 feet away. It was dark. There was music playing, people talking. Isn't it possible you didn't hear everything clearly?" "I heard Jack accuse Emily of lying about being pregnant. I saw them both grab her and push her over that railing. Those facts are crystal clear in my memory." "You never liked Jack, did you?" I paused. Honesty was important. "No, I didn't trust him." "So you already had a negative opinion of him before this incident?" "I had an instinct that something was wrong. Mothers develop those instincts. Or perhaps Fletcher suggested you were looking for reasons to dislike your daughter's husband. And when Emily fell accidentally, your mind twisted what you saw to fit your pre-existing narrative." "That's not what happened." "Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true that you and Emily had discussed divorce before the yacht incident, that Emily had confided in you that she was unhappy in her marriage? This was a trap. I could feel it. Emily mentioned they were having some difficulties, but she was trying to work through them. And isn't it true that you encouraged her to leave Jack? That you told her she deserved better?" "I told her she deserved to be happy and respected." "Yes." "So you wanted Emily to divorce Jack?" "I wanted Emily to be in a healthy, loving marriage. If that meant divorce, then yes." Fletcher smiled like he'd proven something. No further questions. But Sarah stood for redirect. "Mrs. Sullivan, did you want Emily to divorce Jack badly enough that you'd falsely accuse him of attempted murder?" "Absolutely not." "Did you have any financial motive to see Jack arrested?" "None whatsoever." "Did you know about the $40 million trust fund before this incident?" "No. I learned about it during the investigation." Sarah nodded. "So your testimony today is based purely on what you witnessed with your own eyes and heard with your own ears?" "Yes. I have no reason to lie. I'm just telling the truth about what happened to my daughter." "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan." Over the next week, Sarah Morrison methodically built her case. Captain Robert Hayes testified about being on the yacht seeing Jack and Senator Bradford push Emily. The defense tried to claim he'd been drinking, but Captain Hayes produced his medical records showing he didn't drink alcohol due to a medication he was taking. Mrs. Eleanor Gibson testified about watching Jack and the senator act suspicious all evening about hearing them make threatening comments. The defense tried to suggest her age affected her memory, but Mrs. Gibson was so sharp and detailed in her testimony that even Fletcher seemed to give up halfway through cross-examination. Dr. Linda Foster, Emily's treating physician, testified about the severity of Emily's injuries, about the hypothermia that should have killed her, about the pregnancy loss that resulted from the trauma. "In your medical opinion," Sarah asked, "could these injuries have resulted from Emily jumping or climbing into the water herself?" "No," Dr. Foster said firmly. "The head trauma indicates she struck the yacht before entering the water. The pattern is consistent with being pushed against the railing, then over it. If she jumped or climbed down, the injuries would be completely different." The Coast Guard officer who'd pulled Emily from the water testified, his voice breaking as he described finding her. "I've been doing water rescues for 15 years. I've never seen someone survive that long in water that cold. It's a miracle she lived." Then Sarah brought out the financial evidence. A forensic accountant explained the trust fund, the spousal provision, exactly how much money Jack stood to lose if Emily remained pregnant and married to him. $20 million initially, the accountant testified. plus ongoing child support that could total another $5 to $8 million over 18 years. We're talking about Jack Bradford potentially losing $25 to $30 million. Sarah showed the jury Jack's emails with his lawyer, the ones discussing the trust fund and prenuptial agreement. She showed his search history. The courtroom went dead silent as she read the searches aloud. How to induce miscarriage naturally. Accidents that cause pregnancy loss. Cold water exposure pregnancy. Legal definition of accidental death. Several jurors looked at Jack with visible disgust. Fletcher objected, claimed the searches were taken out of context, but Judge Brennan overruled him. These searches occurred 3 weeks before Emily told Jack she was pregnant, Sarah said. 3 weeks. He was already researching ways to end a pregnancy before he even knew his wife was pregnant. Because he knew the trust fund vested in less than a year, he was planning ahead. On the 8th day of trial, Sarah Morrison stood. The state calls Emily Bradford. The courtroom fell silent as Emily walked to the witness stand. She wore a simple gray dress, no jewelry except her grandmother's cross necklace. Her hands didn't shake as she was sworn in. I'd never been more proud of her. Sarah began gently. Emily, please tell the jury about your marriage to Jack Bradford. Emily's voice was steady. We met 4 years ago at a charity fundraiser. He was charming, successful. We dated for a year, got engaged, married a year later. The first year of marriage was good. Or I thought it was. What changed? Jack started staying late at work more often. He was distant. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd say he was stressed about the trust fund vesting, about making sure he managed the money properly when he got it. Did he mention the spousal provision in the trust? Not at first, but about 6 months before. Before the yacht incident, he started asking weird questions. Like, did I think our marriage would last forever? What would I do if we got divorced? Would I expect him to support me financially? What did you think about those questions? They hurt. It felt like he was already planning our divorce. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Sarah showed Emily a calendar. On September 20th of last year, what happened? Emily took a breath. I found out I was pregnant. I'd taken 3 home tests, all positive. I was so excited. I thought maybe a baby would bring us closer together. How did Jack react when you told him? He went very still. Didn't say anything for almost a minute. Then he said, "Are you sure?" I showed him the tests. He said, "I need to make a call," and went into his office and closed the door. Did you hear any of the conversation? Through the door I heard him say, "We have a problem. She's pregnant." Then I couldn't hear any more. What happened that evening? We went to the yacht party. Jack was acting strange all night. Cold, distant. He and his father kept looking at me and whispering. Around 9:30, Jack called me over to where they were standing. Emily's voice wavered slightly. He said, "So you think you can trap me with this pregnancy lie?" I was confused. I said it wasn't a lie, I was actually pregnant. He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. His father moved behind me, blocking me in. Tears started down her face, but her voice stayed clear. I tried to get away. I said, "You're hurting me." Jack said, "I know what you're trying to do. You think I'm stupid." I kept telling him the pregnancy was real, that I wasn't lying. What happened next? Jack looked at his father. They didn't say anything, but something passed between them. An understanding. And then they both grabbed me. Jack had my right arm, Senator Bradford had my left, and they pushed me. Hard. Backward over the railing. Emily, I need to be very clear. The defense claims you climbed onto the railing yourself. Is that true? No. Emily looked directly at the jury. I did not climb onto that railing. I was trying to get away from them. They grabbed me and pushed me. I felt their hands on my arms. I felt the shove. I remember hitting the side of the yacht with my head before I went into the water. What do you remember about being in the water? Emily's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. It was so cold. I couldn't breathe. Every time I tried to inhale, I'd breathe in water. It was dark. I couldn't see anything. I tried to swim toward where I thought the shore was, but my body wouldn't work right. My muscles were seizing up from the cold. She was crying now, but she didn't stop. I thought I was going to die. I prayed for my mom to know I loved her. I prayed for my baby. Her voice broke. I prayed for my baby to somehow survive, even if I didn't. The courtroom was silent except for Emily's quiet sobs. But my baby didn't survive, she said. The cold, the trauma, the fear, it was too much. I lost my baby because my husband decided $20 million was worth more than our lives. Sarah gave her a moment to compose herself. Emily, do you have any doubt about what happened that night? No. Jack and his father pushed me off that yacht intending for me to die. The only reason I'm alive is because the Coast Guard got there in time and because I refused to give up. Thank you, Emily. No further questions. Fletcher's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to suggest Emily was unstable, that she'd been drinking, that her memory was affected by the trauma. He brought up every argument she and Jack had ever had, trying to paint her as a difficult, manipulative wife. But Emily held her ground. You've testified that you and Jack argued about money, Fletcher said. Isn't it true that you spent lavishly on his credit cards? I spent what Jack told me to spend. He wanted me to look a certain way, dress a certain way. I was trying to fit into his world. You wanted his money, didn't you? I wanted my husband to love me. I didn't even know about the trust fund until after this happened. You expect this jury to believe that? I expect this jury to look at the evidence. Jack's search history shows he was researching ways to cause miscarriage 3 weeks before I told him I was pregnant. That's not the behavior of a man who was surprised by the news. That's the behavior of a man who was planning ahead, planning to get rid of me if I became a problem. Fletcher tried to interrupt, but Emily kept going. I loved my husband. I wanted to build a life with him. I wanted our baby. And he threw me off a yacht to die. Those are the facts, Mr. Fletcher, no matter how you try to twist them. Fletcher had no response to that. 2 weeks into trial, it was time for closing arguments. Sarah Morrison stood before the jury one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a simple question. Did Jack Bradford deliberately push his pregnant wife off a yacht intending to kill her? The evidence overwhelmingly says yes. She walked them through it all. The financial motive, $25 million. The premeditation, those search queries 3 weeks before Emily even told him she was pregnant. The witnesses, me, Captain Hayes, Mrs. Gibson, who all saw the same thing. The medical evidence showing Emily's injuries were consistent with being pushed, not jumping. Emily's own testimony. Jack Bradford calculated that Emily's pregnancy would cost him millions of dollars. So he planned. He researched. And on September 20th, with his father's help, he executed that plan. He tried to commit murder. She paused. The only reason we're not trying this as a murder case is because Emily survived. Because she's incredibly strong. Because the Coast Guard arrived in time. But Jack Bradford's intent was clear. He wanted his wife dead. Sarah looked at each juror. Emily lost her baby. She nearly lost her life. She lost her marriage, her trust in people, her sense of safety. All because Jack Bradford cared more about money than about human life. Find him guilty, because that's exactly what he is. Fletcher's closing tried to paint reasonable doubt. Tried to suggest Emily had climbed on the railing, that the witnesses were mistaken, that this was all a tragic accident misinterpreted by a grieving mother. But even I could see it wasn't working. The jury had heard too much evidence, seen too much proof. When Fletcher sat down, he looked defeated. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Emily Thomas and I waited in a small conference room the prosecutor's office had given us. Emily paced. I sat. Thomas read case files, always working. When the call came that the jury had reached a verdict, my heart started racing. We filed back into the courtroom. Jack sat at the defense table, his face pale, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. Judge Brennan entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood. A woman in her 50s, a teacher. She'd taken extensive notes throughout the trial. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? We find the defendant, Jack Bradford, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Judge Brennan banged her gavel for order. On the charge of assault with intent to kill, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty. Emily collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her tight, tears streaming down my own face. Jack sat frozen, staring straight ahead. For the first time since this all began, he looked directly at Emily. Whatever he saw in her face made him look away quickly. Mr. Bradford, Judge Brennan said you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. Sentencing is set for 3 weeks from today. They led Jack away in handcuffs. As he passed our table, Emily stood up. I forgive you, she said quietly. Jack stopped, looked at her. Not for you, Emily continued. For me, so I can move on. But I hope you spend every day in prison thinking about the baby we lost. the life we could have had. And I hope it haunts you." Jack's face crumpled. For the first time, he looked like he might actually feel something. Then the bailiff pulled him away, and he was gone. 3 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. Sarah Morrison had requested the maximum 30 years. Emily was allowed to give a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, faced Judge Brennan, and spoke. "Your Honor, Jack Bradford didn't just try to kill me that night. He killed our baby. He killed the future I'd imagined for us. He killed my ability to trust, to feel safe, to believe in love." Her voice was steady, strong. "I spent 3 hours in freezing water thinking I was going to die, thinking my baby was going to die. And when I woke up in the hospital, I learned that my baby had died, that the pregnancy I'd been so excited about, that I'd hoped would bring us closer together, was gone." She looked at Jack, who sat with his head down. "I don't know if you ever loved me. Maybe you did at first. But somewhere along the way, I became nothing more than an obstacle to your inheritance, a problem to solve, and you decided the solution was murder." Emily turned back to Judge Brennan. "I'm asking you to give Jack Bradford the maximum sentence, not for revenge, but because he's dangerous, because he values money more than human life, because someone who would throw his pregnant wife off a yacht to protect his inheritance will do anything to anyone if the price is right." She returned to her seat beside me. I squeezed her hand. Judge Brennan looked at Jack. "Mr. Bradford, do you have anything to say?" Jack's lawyer started to speak, but Jack shook his head. He stood. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry Emily lost the baby. I'm sorry for everything." "Are you sorry you did it?" Judge Brennan asked. "Or sorry you got caught?" Jack didn't answer. Judge Brennan reviewed the case, the evidence, the impact on Emily. Then she pronounced sentence. "Jack Bradford, you are sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for the first 20 years. You will serve this sentence consecutively, meaning you will serve every single day." The gavel came down. Jack was led away. He looked back once at Emily. She didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead. It was over. Senator William Bradford's trial began 3 months later. This one was bigger, more complex. He faced charges for Victoria's murder conspiracy, in Emily's case, sexual assault of 5 women, obstruction of justice, and financial crimes. The trial lasted 14 months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Dr. Whitfield testified about Victoria's autopsy, about the evidence of abuse, about being pressured to rule it an accident. Patricia Reynolds and 4 other women testified about Bradford's assaults, about being paid off, about years of silence. I testified about watching Bradford help his son push Emily. Financial experts testified about Bradford's illegal campaign contributions and offshore accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on every count. For Victoria's murder, life in prison without parole. For conspiracy, in Emily's case, 20 years consecutive. For the assaults, 10 years each consecutive. For the financial crimes, 15 years consecutive. Senator William Bradford would die in prison. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. Bradford sat stone-faced as each guilty verdict was read. But when they led him away in chains, he looked across the courtroom at me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked back steadily. This is what happens when you hurt someone's child. I hoped he understood that now. It's Sunday evening, and Emily is in my kitchen helping me make dinner. It's our tradition now. Every Sunday she comes over and we cook together, eat together, talk about the week. She's 28 now, stronger than I ever imagined she could be. After the trials ended, she went back to school, got her master's degree in landscape architecture. Now she designs parks and public spaces, creating beautiful places where children can play safely. I got a new commission, she tells me, chopping vegetables. A memorial garden for the children's hospital. They want water features, sensory plants, accessible pathways. That sounds perfect for you. It is. I'm thinking about incorporating a butterfly garden. Something hopeful, you know, about transformation. I smile at that. My daughter has transformed so much since that night on the yacht. She's found purpose, meaning peace. Mom, she says, setting down her knife. I need to tell you something. My heart jumps. What? I'm dating someone. His name is David. He's a landscape architect I've been working with. We've been seeing each other for 3 months. I set down my own knife. How do you feel about that? Scared, she admits. Excited, hopeful, terrified, all of it. That sounds normal. He knows everything. About Jack, about the yacht, about losing the baby. I told him on our second date because I needed him to know. And he was just kind. He listened. He didn't judge. He said, "That must have been incredibly hard. I'm glad you survived." Tears prick my eyes. He sounds like a good man. I think he is. I'm taking it slow. Really slow. But Mom, I want to try. I want to believe I can have a normal relationship someday. A family, maybe. I want to believe not all men are like Jack. I pull her into a hug. Not all men are like Jack. Most men are nothing like Jack. You deserve love, sweetheart. Real love. The kind that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. I know. I'm working on believing that. We go back to cooking. The apartment is warm, filled with the smell of garlic and herbs and something baking in the oven. Normal. Peaceful. My phone rings. Thomas. "Turn on the news," he says without preamble. I find the remote switch on the small TV in my living room. Breaking news. 3 more Massachusetts politicians arrested. Federal investigation into corruption network. They've been digging deeper, Thomas explains. Turns out Bradford was just one piece of a larger network. Political corruption, money laundering, abuse of power. The FBI has been working on this for 2 years since Bradford's arrest. They just made their move. Good, I say. Let them all fall. After we hang up, Emily comes to stand beside me watching the news. "Does it feel good?" she asks. Knowing what we started led to this. "It feels necessary," I say. "We didn't start out trying to change the system. We just wanted justice for what they did to you. But if seeking that justice helps expose other corruption, helps protect other women, then yes, it feels good." Emily nods. "Uncle Tommy called it a revolution." "Your uncle has always been dramatic." She laughs. It's a real laugh, light and genuine. I hear it more often now. Later after dinner, after Emily has gone home, I sit in my favorite chair with a cup of tea and think about everything that's happened. 2 years ago, my daughter went off a yacht into the freezing Atlantic. She almost died. She lost her baby. Her world fell apart. And now she's designing butterfly gardens and dating a kind man and learning to hope again. Jack Bradford is in prison where he'll stay for at least 20 years. Senator William Bradford is in prison where he'll die. 5 women who'd been silenced for years got to tell their truth. A corrupt political network was exposed. And Emily survived. Not just survived, thrived. My phone buzzes. A text from Emily. "Thank you for never giving up. For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. I love you, Mom." I text back, "I'll always fight for you. That's what mothers do. Love you too, sweetheart." I think about Senator Bradford in his cell, about Jack in his, about all the powerful men who thought they were untouchable. I think about what Thomas said during the investigation. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. He was right. I spent my whole life being quiet, patient, accommodating. People like the Bradfords counted on that. They counted on people like me looking away, staying silent, being afraid. But they forgot something important. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means patient. And patience combined with determination, love and truth is the most powerful weapon in the world. The Bradfords thought they could throw my daughter away like trash and face no consequences. They were wrong. I take a sip of tea and smile. Sometimes the people you underestimate are the most dangerous ones. And I proved that a quiet architect who spent 40 years designing buildings could also design the perfect demolition. The Bradfords' empire was built on lies, violence, and arrogance. Mine was built on solid foundations, love, patience, and truth. In the end, only one structure was left standing.